Okay, welcome to part 2 of our information session series for core content for Salesforce. In part 2, we will focus on the configuration of the SAML authentication between Salesforce and core content. But first, before we go into the fun part, I'm going to walk you through the topics we are going to cover today. Okay, first things first, we'll take a look at the documentation. And then we will work to establish a SAML authentication for single sign-on between the systems. This will entail configure an auth partition in core content and the connected app in Salesforce. We'll then obtain the sign-in key and create the certificate that is needed for the connection, create the attributes and the SAM for the SAML token claims, enable the automatic user provision in core content, and last but not least, we'll assign the connected app to a profile in Salesforce in order to work. So please note, this is part of a multi-part session focusing on the installation and configuration of core content for Salesforce. Okay, so let's dive right into, and let's go here into Knowledge Center. So in case you don't remember how to get to the administrator guide, you can go back to part 1 where I showed exactly how you navigate here your support portal. Okay, so we need here the HTML guide because that's probably the most convenient to work with here. So we don't need to download anything, and we just have it right here. So integrating it Salesforce. As part 1, we covered basically the prerequisites and installing the packages in Salesforce. Part 2, we will here focus on the SAML authentication between Salesforce and core content. Okay, I think I mentioned this already, but essentially what we're going to do, we're setting up a partition in core content, SAML auth partition in core content, then configure a connected app in Salesforce, and the two are needed basically to talk to each other, and then establish a single sign-on between the two systems. All right, here these are the steps that we are going through. So we're going to use the help file. So we're going to switch back and forth between the help here. Also, we need to switch back and forth between Salesforce and core content because we need to copy back and forth information from both systems and from both sides of the configuration in order to make this all work together. Okay, first let's go into core content. All right, so here we have our core content tenant. First thing is we're going here to the authentication section and create a new authentication partition. So let's just use here, we're going to use PM01 on SAML, so because we're connecting to that Salesforce org. Also make sure that you add a description, is always helpful. And that's it on here. Let's save that. So here we have the SAML partition created. In order to finalize the configuration, we need actually to switch over to Salesforce and start with the configuration over there in order to get some of the config values that we will need to continue then the configuration here on the core content side. All right, there we go. And let's move into the setup section. And here we are going to apps, an app manager, and we are going to create a new connected app. Okay, let's For a connected app, it has to be, again, unique, and I'll suggest to match this up with the configuration that you have on the core content side. So we're again going to use PM01 SAML. The API name is suggest to leave that as is or as proposed. And here is then the contact email of the administrator, or if you have a central mailbox for all these notification emails to arrive. So there's nothing more in this basic section here. Now, web app, we're going to enable this as a SAML application. The entity ID, we don't have that yet. That has to come from the core content side. So we're just going to put in here a placeholder, and then later on we are coming back here to update that. Okay, so now let's look at the documentation really quick. I'm not entirely sure. So okay, we have this SAML and the ACS URL. Okay, it's going to be username, and then the subject type is username, and then here that's the name ID format is the SAML 2.0 name ID format persistent. Okay, right, username, SAML 2.0 name ID format persistent. The issuer, that's something you can leave as is, and then as well here the default IDP certificate. Okay, what else? Issuer. Okay, so we want this to switch to 256 here. Okay, so we cannot activate here verify request signature, because for this we would also need then the certificate. So we'll get that in a later step, and then come back in here and upload the certificate to finalize the configuration. So what we can do is we can here change the signing algorithm to 256, and that should be it. So let's now go ahead and save. Okay, now let's go here to manage. Okay, so from here we need the metadata discovery endpoint. We're going to copy this value here, and then we're going back into Core Contents Admin Center, authentication. Here's our partition, PM01 SAML. Open this. Now we're going to create an authentication scheme, and to better orient you, let's go back here to the documentation really quick. So we're back up here where we're creating now this authentication scheme, and for that we need this IDP metadata URL we just copied basically from Salesforce. Okay. I suggest again, probably use the same name, PM01 SAML, makes things a little bit easier, and that's our standard schema, and the authentication scheme here is SAML, and the authentication provider is other. Okay, so you see there's a bunch of URLs that have been generated. So again, make sure you copy those into a text file, because we'll then need them in Salesforce again. But although it's most important here is this IDP metadata URL. So the easiest way is you can basically use that URL that we copied from Salesforce, which contains basically all the necessary metadata for the SAML to work into here. The Core Content does actually do a validation check, so you cannot just copy a placeholder in here, so it has to be a valid XML format that meets here the standard. Okay. Name ID format is going to be persistent. We're going to enable sign SAML request. Then remember, we selected SHA-256, so we want to make sure that we are matching this here up. And the user provisioning is basically auto provision on login. Okay, so we're going to save this. Okay, let's move the documentation really quick. So we just finished here this section of the configuration. We also need to make sure that we assign the auth partition in core content to the subscription. And let's go and do this right away before we forget. Okay, let's go back in here. And so we just did the authentication schema. Next is basically here subscriptions, where we assign now this partition to a particular subscription in your tenant. So for us, it's going to be this subscription here, and add. So therefore that's done. Okay, so next is for us to basically set up the certificate, and for that we need the SAML metadata URL, and we get this from core content. We're going back here, general settings, authentication schema. Here we have the SAML metadata URL, so we're going to copy this value and open new browser tab. So that's what we are looking for. So what we're going to do, we're going to save this as a XML file on the desktop and then use a text editor to edit the file. Just fine. Let's leave it as login XML. Save. Alright, so let's go and this file. So we have that here, the login XML we just saved. Open that in a text editor. Get this text editor over here too. There we go. Okay, go back here to the documentation for a moment. So there are very clear instructions in here what we need to look for. So we're going to look for the key descriptor signing section, and then we want everything that is between those two tags. Okay, let's go get this. So let's just do this here real quick, easier than to read. There we go, that's our key descriptor signing, and that's our certificate, what we need here between those two tags. So we're going to copy this, and then open a new tab. Okay, now it's very important, as the instructions here tell, if we go back here, that we basically remove all the blank spaces, so carriage return and line feed from the text. So this should be basically one continuous string. And the best way to do this is here. Okay. Now from the documentation we need the begin tag and the end tag, so let's just copy this from here, that's the easiest. Okay, now let's save this, save as. So that's going to be our certificate, PM 01 cert. Leave that as txt. Save. Okay. We don't need that anymore. I'll remove this out of the way. Okay. So with that squared away, take a look here. We are going back into Salesforce, and in there we need then to use the entity ID and the ACS URL, and as well as then the certificate that we just created. Our Salesforce, back here, App Manager. Here's PM01, so that's what we want. Now go into edit mode. Okay, let's take my text file over. Remember I mentioned to copy these URLs in a text file because they become handy. So we need here for the entity URL, we need to copy the SAML login URL that we have, and this is this one here. Copy a link and copy, and then we need the ACS URL, which is the SAML SSO URL. This SAML SSO URL. Here we go. Okay. And now, since we have the certificate, we can now go here, verify request signatures, activate that, and now we're basically prompted here to upload that certificate. Right? Let's go here to our, where we have that, so it's the PM01 cert. Okay. And now let's save. And let's take a look at the documentation where we at. We just completed here this section, and next will basically be assigning it to a profile. So we're going to skip this for a moment. We'll come back. We will not forget about this. We'll just do it at a later point. But let's go next here to the setting up the attributes that we need, these custom attributes, and that's what we essentially need. Email, username, last name, and first name. That is what is synchronized then from Salesforce over into Core Content for the automatic user provisioning. Here we are in Salesforce. That's where we just left off. Custom attributes, new. Let's do here, just copy here, and then that's the username and email. Now we're going to repeat this a couple more times for all the other attributes as well. All right, and that was it for setting up these custom attributes. Okay, before we forget, let's also then assign here this to a profile. So do so, or user profile. So there are going to be a bunch of profiles already in here, but the two of interest are currently, okay, save. The two of interest for us are the system administrator and the standard user profile. And here connected app access, PM01 SAML, activate this, save. And let's do the same for our standard user as well, edit. Connected app access, PM01 SAML, activate, save. Right, then we're okay here for now. Go documentation. Okay, so we did all of this. We also assigned the profile. The next is go back into Admin Center and create the customized claim configuration. Okay, let's go here into the authentication schema. Here, let's edit, all the way to the bottom, add claim. Okay, let's add the claim. The first is going to be email. There we go. And the value for email is okay. Next is display name. Add claim. Going to be surname. The last one is going to be name. Oh. Right, save. Alright, so that was pretty much it here in terms of the configuration in Core Content and Salesforce. I want to take a look at the session outline just to double check. We did setting this up, configure the auth partition and the connected app, created the certificate, created the attributes for the SAML token claims, auto user provisioning enabled in Core Content, and we assigned the app to profiles. Okay, so I think with that in mind, that's all we can do here as part of the SAML configuration. The next session will be focusing on setting up the OAuth system configuration between Salesforce and Core Content that is needed for Core Content to connect to Salesforce. So that will be part of the next session. With that, I would like to thank you, and until next time.